This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
I've been so, I don't want to quite, stress is not quite the right word, but I've been late for every single thing for the past 2 weeks since this stupid article came out.
Yeah. Have you been sleeping at all?
No, like it was like I was going to go to sleep around 10 yesterday, and then I saw that someone I knew very well, who was like a friend for decades, wrote an article just totally trashing me and saying everything they knew about me, which was weird. Like, it wasn't like they knew anything bad about me, but so they had to make stuff up. But stuff like this is happening constantly, either good or bad. And then I had to wake up early. I was on Jim and Sam's show, and of course Jim Norton I went to high school with, so it's always like hanging out with friends when I go on that show. And then there's just, I don't know what people think. Like, I got another death threat, like, get the hell back to Iowa. You're not even a New Yorker.
What? Like Iowa?
Yeah, fortunately, I carry my birth certificate around. So I took a photo of my birth certificate.
Great lesson we've all learned from the Obama administration.
Exactly. I'm being attacked by birthers, and I took a picture of my birth certificate and sent it to the guy. I'm born and raised I was born in Manhattan, raised right around Manhattan, and I've been in Manhattan and New York City my entire adult life. So, and like someone wrote an article who did know me and said, no, when I added up, he's been in New York 12 years or
12
whatever.
minutes.
And I'm like, first off, that's wrong. Like, one thing I learned is that in general, don't respond at all to any negativity. Like, just completely ignore it, no matter who they are, no matter how close they were, no matter what buttons are being pressed. But I was thinking to myself, where is this math coming from? My adult life, kind of at post-college life, started in 1994. I've been in New York for 26 years.
Yep.
Not to mention being born and being a baby here and so on. And second off, who cares? Like, in my article, I mention all true stories about my own personal love affair with New York, like why I love it so much. But then these are real problems that are occurring. Like, I'm not making them up. I source, it's real data. And I maybe added one thing to the discussion, which is that the effect of increased bandwidth on remote work.
Yeah.
But, why do you think, there's been other anti-New York articles, like, why do you think, and we're going to get to Side Hustle Fridays, by the way, in a second, audience, but why do you think, Brendon, you just wrote the Power Bible about persuasion and frame control. Have I lost kind of macro frame here somehow? Or like, what I do admit, this is the one article I've probably ever written where I didn't really have, and I thought this when I hit publish. This was the one thing I was afraid of when I hit publish, was that every other article I've written has like some hope, some optimism,
and this one didn't.
On to.
Yeah.
This one didn't, because I'm legitimately concerned. I'm raising a family in New York City. Like, these are problems, and they're hard problems. So maybe that was it. Like, I don't know. And there's other articles.
Actually, this is interesting, James, because I think, first of all, there's like two things I want to say right before I even jump into the frame stuff. But like, the first one is that I'm like kind of in awe because you became a national story of your own creation. Like, just stepping back, it's not like, it's like you created this entire situation, which is like amazing. Like, that alone is spectacular, I think.
Right. Like, somehow or other, it became the Jerry Seinfeld versus James Altucher feud.
Like
a friend.
That's what it became. Like, I had people forwarding me articles who they were like, hey, this is the guy who just wrote the forward for your book, right? They're like, what the hell? Like, Jerry Seinfeld, like what? Like, Jerry Seinfeld? And I was like, if you had sat me down and said, what do you think the craziest thing that's going to happen in 2020 is? At the beginning of the year, I would have never first of all, I would have never guessed anything that was happening. But the last item on that list would be like, hey, one of my comedy heroes is gonna go after one of my mentors. like what? Yeah. What?
Yeah, like, why Jerry Seinfeld? Like I've been a comedian for just 5 years, own part of a comedy club, but it could have been anybody from any other industry would have probably written actually a good editorial against me. Like there's things to say, but then Jerry Seinfeld, the king of comedy, wrote essentially kind of a weird personal attack. It didn't really, I mean, I understand his what he's saying about the energy of a city and grit, and clearly he loves the city just like we do. But I don't. That's a whole other question. Like, which I'll never get the answer to. Is why he wrote this way. It was kind of a not the professional way to do this.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one friend of mine wrote me. A friend of mine who really believes that we're in a VR simulation, and he has a lot of math behind it and theories. And he even said to me, "See, like you wake up on a Monday morning." Jerry Seinfeld is attacking you in the New York Times, and it's just another normal day in 2020.
This is literally like I said this to you when I was emailing you or whatever, messaging you on Twitter. I think I was like, "What?" It feels like somebody's playing the game of Earth, and they have gotten so bored into the 90s that they were like, you know what? As soon as we get into the aughts and then the 2010s, I'm just going to start hitting random disaster and see like what happens in the game, like.
Yeah,
this is madness. This is the craziest year. But I want to. Here's something I want to mention though, is because I think that part of why this article blew up, in my opinion, is I didn't even say I'm like still I'm still doing sales for this startup that I'm consulting with, and I do some consulting in a few different areas, but it's fascinating because I'll call up people and have cold calls with people who will mention your article. Out of nowhere. They don't know who I am. They have no idea. And they'll just be like, by the way, are you guys headquartered in New York? Do you think New York's dead? And I'm like, are you referring to the James Altucher article? And they're like, yeah, I don't know. It's been really thought-provoking. I don't really know what to think. And I'm like, this is the what? Like
that is insane. And look, I like it when my articles are read. Every writer likes that. But I totally did not plan this. I just to make it clear, I don't like this. Like bad things have been happening to me as a result. Like it's been very. I guess the good thing is if you try to take a positive from everything, and you're the author of the Stoic Salesman. So this is from taking a page from your book. Like being stoic about it, I am honestly learning to have a thicker skin. I mean, family has been upset at me. Good friends have been really upset, and it's like my life's changed in the past 2 weeks, and trying to just find a good light on it is, I guess more people are aware of my writing now. Some like it and some don't. But also maybe I build a thicker skin as a result, because I've had to really not get mired down in, just looking at every thread that's been negative. And by the way, like when you call outside the city and someone brings up the article, they don't hate me, right?
No. I think a lot of people, so that was going to be the point that I was going to get to, is I think that, look, I've been talking, as Bill and I talk about all kinds of stuff, but we've obviously been talking about this. And I guess one of the things I just want to mention about it is part of the reason I think you actually still are controlling the frame of this. So there's two things from a frame perspective that came up. First of all, is it's like Jerry Seinfeld is and I don't mean this as a slight against you. He is way higher status than you are.
Yes, I'm nobody.
Like he's on the top.
He's Jerry
of the
Seinfeld.
Comedy, yeah, he's on the top of the comedy pyramid, and like he's on the top of the. I mean, he's like a billionaire, and he's the
most successful TV show ever.
The most successful, maybe the most successful. I mean, depending on who you talk to, he's at least top 5 greatest comedians ever. He's super successful. Yeah. He's like, the guy's amazing. And so for him to be like, for him to feel the need to write this article, or however it happened, even his like PR people or whatever, it's like it instantaneously raised your status, because that would be like if Donald Trump wrote a tweet about me, I would be like, it'd be like, why did Donald Trump write a tweet about this dude who just authored this book? Like, why? What possible motivation would he have? Because it's like it raised yours. It either implicitly raised your status or it lowered his status. And either way, it was like strange, because some of the articles that I was reading about it were saying like, they were like, James Altucher's article, I think it can accurately be described. And we'll talk about Side Hustle Friday. Sorry to like sidetrack this, but
no, this is, I need help. I need therapy.
Good. So it was like, the article I think accurately can be described as a loose collection of James Altucher's thoughts and feelings about the situation in New York, which he feels is dire. And I think that's a pretty accurate description of your article. And you're like, why Jerry Seinfeld?
I tell my story of being in New York. Like, I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11. I was at the building and I lived right there.
Yeah.
I lived on Wall Street during the financial crisis. Like, I get grit. I live in New York, and I was in all through the pandemic and the protests, everything. I was at the protests. Like, I know grit.
Yeah, so that's what was so strange about like the idea that like, Jerry feels like he needs to respond to you says almost something about like it says one of a few things. It either says that for some reason he was personally slighted at the idea that you coming from the comedy world was relevant to him, or he's feeling thin-skinned for some reason. Some people were maybe speculating that maybe he's got something moving around. Like, I know he's got like a book that he's released, and maybe he's trying to capture the attention of a national story because he's so, closely associated with New York and comedy. This is a good opportunity for him to just stay in the public conversation. Could be that also. But like, one of the things that I think is relevant here and is that I think you still control the frame of this situation, because not only did he not refute any of your facts and he didn't bring up any himself, but like, the reason people are reacting so strongly to this is because people implicitly believe that this frame is true. Like, even if they're let's remember this: the fact that they're arguing against it implicitly accepts that that's the reality. So it isn't the case that somebody's like, James is just wrong, like, period. The frames that you set in that article resonated both intellectually, meaning the data, the discursive information, the logos that you presented was true, and people could accept it and not refute it. And the second was that the pathetic, meaning pathos and emotions that you presented, were also true. So those two frames that got set, I think, set really hard, and that's why all of these media outlets suddenly reacted to it, is because it was like, this dude he's hitting a true note, and if you really care about New York, you have to accept that this is true, because you can't solve a problem without recognizing it. And it's like, if nobody had said, look, New York is dying, and here's why, then nobody would be attempting to find solutions to it or be even aware of the problem. So it's strange to me that people are like, James doesn't love New York. You're like, no, that's why he wrote this article. It's because he loves this city.
Yeah. Right, like, I'm not trashing the city. Like, I've lived in the city forever. So
that's like you saying the woman I love has a drinking problem, and then people would be like, "Why do you hate her?" You're like, "No, what?"
Right. That's a great analogy. I'm going to use that analogy.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, but that's good to know. It hasn't felt like I've had frame, just because, it's one of those things where you only pay attention to the vocal minority. So even if it's like 95-5 in my favor, if you can even say in my favor and things like that, it's the 5 that they're the loudest, they're the nastiest, and because of cognitive biases, we have a negative bias to look at the things that are negative, and that's how we survive as a species.
Yep.
That's what I noticed. And then on top of it, when I see, oh, I gave you your first job 20 years ago, and now you're shitting all, or you're my cousin that we grew up together.
You're my third cousin once removed. Let me tell you what I've known about James Altucher my whole life.
No, there's been articles like that. Like, I've known him since he was born. And like, okay, well, let me ask you this. Like, what, obviously sometimes you can't help it. Somebody's going to press your buttons. If a million people are saying things about you and you have 3 buttons to press, some of those million are
they're going to find out. They're going to find out. Just the law of averages tells you they're going to find those buttons.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of quickly, and I've always had a thick skin. I mean, I've been doing this for 18 years, writing stuff that people agree with and disagree with. But this is like the most painful in a weird way. And also the most gratifying to see, look, people are responding to the way I write, I guess. But how do you, or even looking at this situation from the outside, how would you sort of armor yourself in terms of like, it took me a day or two and I finally stopped responding to all negativity. But then the negativity got more and more, maybe because I wasn't responding, it got more and more personal. People felt more and more safe. And then they were piggybacking under Jerry Seinfeld's umbrella and then Andrew Cuomo's umbrella and more. And so they felt safe. Oh, okay, well, at least everybody's on my side. This is finally my chance to say something nasty to James, who I've always hated. Like, how do you armor yourself?
Well, this is like, so let me say three things, I suppose. Is that the first is that this is like amazing to me because you have such a spectacular opportunity here. And the opportunity is like you are being presented with such a strong series of, all these frames that are being held up in front of you. And the opportunity is, am I either going to fold into this or react to it, or am I going to find the things inside of myself that I know are good and that I trust and that I think are the best parts of me that I share with the world? And I think you wrote the article from that place anyway. And am I going to trust those things to try to navigate through this situation and, surround myself with, I think, people like, I know, I'm sure, you have an amazing wife. Like I wouldn't doubt for a second that like Robin is anything but like 110% on your side. And so I think like you've surrounded yourself with good people. And so as a result, the ability to trust those things inside of you is the challenge. And it's weird, man, because like we talked on the pod when we talked about the Power Bible that I went on that podcast in Chicago that everybody hates you. And it's like, there's something about that moment where you're like, I've shown my shadow with the world. Some people like it, but they react to it. They don't like it, whatever it is. And like, in a way, James, I'm kind of jealous that you have this opportunity, even though it must be painful, because whoever you're going to be on the other side of this is like spectacular. And you already are spectacular, but saying like this next like place that you're going to is really amazing. And I think that I wish I had, it's strange because as someone who wants to, create and does some consulting and coaching for advising people in situations like this, I do have to admit that like I've never gone through this, but I do know that like the challenge of trusting yourself is just harder because people want to tell you who you are and you know who you are. And that's just the same question that anybody has to face every day anyway. It's just that the stakes are so much higher now for you. That's it. Yeah. Like I reread the Power Bible the other day, and one of the things we say in it is, as you ascend, and we said this right in the conclusion, it's like, as you ascend, you will know that you are on the right path because you will meet stronger and stronger enemies and stronger foes who attempt to outframe you. And you've reached the level where the king of comedy is trying to outframe you.
And it's funny because then I wrote a rebuttal, and then there are articles like structurally analyzing his rebuttal versus my rebuttal and kind of breaking them down sentence by sentence. And it's like almost like there's this meta analysis now of what's going on.
You've launched an entire ecosystem. That's how you know.
It's true. Like in a world where people can't even pay attention to like a 12-second TikTok video, somehow or other, like 30 million people are talking about a 5,000-word article about New York City. And it's just been, but it's interesting about words and vocabulary and frame because, this is a good example of what you guys talk about in the Power Bible. Like people try to make a vocabulary around what is happening and then take control of the meaning of those words.
Oh yeah, they're labeling them immediately.
Right,
they're labeling what's happening and then they're defining their terms. And it allows them to control the frame.
Yeah, like here's an example that just occurred to me this morning. Like, so for the past 2 weeks, some people have been saying, well, he's just an opportunist. He came into New York City for the opportunity and then he's leaving at the first sign of trouble, which, okay, first off, couldn't be further from the truth. Like, I've been here all along. But then I was thinking, okay, look, what is... This person was using the word, and it was several people. Let's take one in particular. This person was using the word opportunist as a negative. And I was responding to that.
How dare you? How dare you take advantage of opportunities, sir?
Right. Like that was my first reaction was like, oh no, I'm not just an opportunist. But then I was thinking, you know what? I've got like 5 kids. I've got, hopes and dreams and wishes and ambitions like everyone else. And yeah, take advantage of opportunities, as long as I'm not hurting anybody and being ethical and honest. And who wouldn't, like, what are you going to be? Not an opportunist?
Yeah,
Like,
it doesn't make any
even if
sense
you're
because
supporting the
that's how you know it's
community-
not a real logical point. Is there's no contrapositive. There's no point that you can go, okay, well, what would a person what is the implication of what a good person would do in this circumstance according to this other person's logic? And there's nothing there. It's because
Right. Well, they might say like, oh, well, you would stay and support the community, which I've been doing. But even that aside, is that people who are opportunists will support their community because that's the best thing for them is to live in a good community. So I wrote the article as an opportunist.
A rising tide raises all boats, and I feel like
Yeah.
you add a lot of value to your community in a lot of different ways. So I feel like that doesn't make any sense. That kind of criticism. But that's why I keep saying like this is why you still continue to kind of own the frame in this situation. And I don't think that you have to defend the feelings of negativity that people have. I don't think you have to defend because those feelings are their own. The points that make sense to me are that you've pointed out real problems that are happening and people are reacting to that and their reactions are their own. This is why people have agency. James can't be responsible for all of their reactions. But it is very interesting that like you've put this frame on a trigger point for a lot of people and had no sense that you were going to do it. It's like stepping on a mine, you know what I mean? But like that's why I think you still kind of control and own it is it's like they're not responding. I haven't read anything that has been like a salient point. This is why they're all turning to ad hominem arguments is because they don't have anything that they can refute this with that makes sense. I mean, like the best arguments I've heard and like is just that, hey, look, some corporations are taking advantage of the fact that real estate in New York is so cheap. And you're like, that's great. That's really cool that they're doing that. It'll probably remain a very important commercial hub, but it's not going to be the same city it was in 2018 or 19. It just won't be,
I mean, and then we could move on to the Side Hustle Fridays. But like,
yeah, sorry,
look,
everybody.
I'm legitimately worried.
You turned in for business ideas,
right? Like on today we're recording this on a Thursday. On Monday, De Blasio is supposed to, the mayor of New York City, who also has referenced my article, he's supposed to fire 22,000 employees because tax revenues are going lower in New York City, and that's really the problem. And he's going to have to fire EMTs, police, garbage collectors, MTA workers, teachers. These are all essential workers for the growth of the city and for our children and for us. And, and then he's saying, no indoor dining till next year, which means, and I'm not saying this, every restaurant owner is saying this, 95% of restaurants are going to go out of business.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me saying this, it's the community. But yeah, anyway, I don't know why I became the poster boy for it, which by the way, and then on the flip side of it, the rest of the country, I think maybe, opportunity will disperse and flow to the rest of the country in a way it never has before,
completely.
Which is a positive for the youth of today and innovation and so on. Maybe some people are a little too gleeful to dance on a grave, and I'm not supporting that at all because I live on that grave. But
let me say 2 points to wrap this up. Sorry, and then we can move on and talk about courses and stuff. Is I just want to say, my uncle Michael McClure, he's a pretty interesting guy. He wrote an article. I didn't even know this, but he wrote an article and shared with me recently that steelmans a lot of the points that you were making. It's pretty fascinating stuff. I should send that to you just to take a look at.
Oh, I read it.
Oh, yeah. Did you?
Yeah. I thought it was good and I thought he had an interesting take there where at first I'm reading this and I'm like, is he going to just say the same thing everyone else is saying? But then he nicely played it. It was, what was the blog?
UncView. Is the
UncView, yeah, because he's the uncle and you're the nephew.
Yeah.
No, I read that. I thought that was very good, and I thought he did a smart job, and it was a good way of writing it.
Yeah, that was just the one point I was going to make, and the second one escapes me. I guess we can head into talking about courses and stuff, man.
No, but I always appreciate your insight, and you always have interesting things to say, and you've been on the podcast before, of course. You were the first to do a 30-day book challenge. You wrote The Stoic Salesman based on a conversation we had on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously based on your own experiences as being an expert salesperson, as well as your understanding of the philosophy of Stoicism. I've read the book. It's a great book. People should read it. It's on sale at Amazon, The Stoic Salesman. You've also wrote the Power Bible, which I wrote the foreword to. It's the best book on persuasion I've ever read, and I actually wish I had written it, so I'm glad I at least wrote the foreword to it.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on the podcast. But now I didn't know this. You told me just yesterday you created an online course for almost no money, and you've turned this into a reliable source of income for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And what I like about this is that it hasn't yet, like sometimes I have people on and it's like they became a this or that, and they started off small, and 5 years later they're making $10 million a year doing it. And I do think, I don't like the typical definition of a side hustle, which is just like, oh, I signed up for the Uber of dog walking and now I make an extra $6 an hour whenever I have a free moment. I don't like those side gigs, but I like the ones where they could start off decent and they could potentially turn into a 6 or 7 figure income. And you're still on that path. Like, you've started off, it's a reliable source of income.
Yep.
It's not yet, let's say it's a reliable 5-figure source, but it's not yet a 6-figure source, but it's on the way there. And I think catching someone in the process and asking you how you did it, I know you did it from total scratch. Like, what was going on in your life when you decided to do this course?
So this is great.
So just to mention one thing, this is about building an online course, and we're going to end with nothing to start with. There's more sophisticated ways to build an online course, but I really wanted to hear this point of view.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was a very complicated situation that led to me doing this. So I realized so for the listener, you should just understand that I think I realized some time ago that I was thinking, I want to get to, I love doing comedy, as you know. I love pursuing comedy. I've done comedy for 20 years. And I just want to get to a point. My goal here is I just want to get to a point where my side hustles and passive income specifically can get to a point where I can transition from doing sales as a day job. Everybody at my office is going to hear this and be like, "Wait, what? You want to? Wait, what? You want to leave?" But
you can't fire me. I'm all the sales.
Yeah, I'm all of it. I have a team. Damn it! But the point is, I want to get, so like many people probably listening, I just wanted to get to a point where I could pursue my passion. Here's the problem with comedy. It's super time consuming, which is great if you love it. I love the fact that it's super time consuming. I love hanging out with comedians. I love going to clubs. I love all of that. I love the whole process. I love writing jokes. I love working on jokes. I love getting audiences to laugh. I love the whole process. However, unless you are really famous, unless your career is taken off, unless you've really built an audience, you're not really making that much money. And all of those things are full-time jobs.
Just to add to that, like, as you know, Brendon, because you've been there almost since the beginning. For me, like, I've been, doing stand-up for 5 years. It's not a hobby.
Yeah.
Like, anyone who does comedy as a hobby is not doing stand-up comedy. Like that, there's no such thing as stand-up comedy as a hobby. It's consuming all of your mental energy. You have to get really good at noticing the unusual and then turning that into something that's going to force complete strangers in a dark room to uncontrollably
people
laugh.
You don't know to like you. That's
from
the
Sweden.
Job. So
right. It is all consuming. And then even just the process of going to a club, waiting for your turn, doing your set, and then, kind of unwinding from that alone is 3-4 hours. So if you do multiple shows in a night and you're doing 4 or 5 nights a week, that's just the basic act of it is 30 hours a week. And then there's the preparation, there's the studying.
I mean, it's the worst ROI for time investment ever. It's
and I would say after 5 years, the first check I've gotten from comedy was this past year.
I mean, I've been doing comedy for 20 years, and I do, I up until COVID was doing road gigs a lot in the Midwest, and I was getting paid, but I've made more money on my online courses than I made last year doing comedy. Like, that's how more lucrative they are. So the point of all of this was, I was like, I just want to start making things that'll draw some passive income to me, because I could see that if I really want to take this as seriously as I want to, I'm gonna have to have other assets that exist in the world that that create value and then capture some of that value.
So I want to unpack that a little. So you made a course on doing stand-up comedy, right? An online course on doing stand-up comedy.
Yep. That's my most successful course.
But let me unpack that for a second, because there's some interesting things there. One is, I think a lot of people think, well, I can't do a course. I'm not Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock, or I can't do a course on cooking. I'm not Wolfgang Puck or whoever is the famous chefs of the day.
They think you got to be good enough to be on Masterclass in order to create a course.
And like it's not like you're doing Netflix specials. You were doing road gigs in,
La Crosse, Wisconsin,
cities, and that's great. Yeah. But like you're not like a known, other comedians would probably say, because this is how comedians are, let's just be honest. Other comedians would probably look at you and say, what? That guy's doing a course on comedy?
Oh, completely.
How
completely.
comedians talk about each other. So I want to kind of burst that bubble. And, okay, sorry, go forward.
Well, no, so I mean, like the listener might also think like, okay, well, sure, dude, you've been doing comedy for 20 years. Like maybe you have a lot of knowledge about it. Well, it's like, first of all, I experienced those feelings because I was like, I'm not Dave Chappelle. I'm not Jerry Seinfeld. And I could never be, because I like God. James. But but I can't, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like I experienced the same insecurities that I think anybody would moving into this. Like it automatically puts my feeling of like, oh yeah, I know how to do stand-up comedy, and let me go ahead and tell you how to do it in a kind of arrogant way. And of course that is like kryptonite for gaining the interest of other comedians. So I'm aware of like, this was a risk for me to do in terms of my reputation and at least the comedy community. But I thought to myself, you know what? I don't care. I'm at a point where if I really love comedy as much as I love it, do I want to do it in the way that I want to do it and have the ability to do that? Or do I want to just try to please other comedians, which will lead to zero financial success? So I decided, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. And the point,
which by the way is also a very important point. Like you had the voices of probably every comedian in your head arguing with you against doing this. And sometimes persuasion is not about persuading other people. It's about actually persuading those very real voices in your head to just shut up. You have to gain frame
on yourself
over these other voices.
Over these voices that echo around your head. And, I think that's a good point. And somebody listening to this, it's like, whoever you are, okay, you have some skill and ability to create a very simple online course. And it could be very simple. It could be how to change a tire. It could be how to make a sandwich. Like, here's something I actually thought about this when we agreed to do this podcast is when I was in high school and into college, I sound like such a dummy, but I literally, James, I was such a mama's boy that like my mom had always made me food that like into college I would go to like the, dining cafeteria or whatever by the dorms, but like I never made myself any meals. Like I didn't even know how to do that. And if there had been Skillshare around at the time, I would have binged all of these courses on how to make a sandwich because I literally had no idea how to do it. Like I couldn't even see the mental parts to be like, go to the store, pick up deli meat, buy bread, come home, put them together like that. I literally couldn't even do that. So somewhere there is someone who doesn't know how to make a sandwich, and there's someone listening to this podcast who knows how to do it and knows how to do it well enough that they can teach you how to meal prep for the week or teach you how to, arrange your schedule so that you can take advantage of downtime to get more done, or just whatever that happens to be. I guarantee you somebody listening to this has that skill. So what I did basically was, and I've gotten this down to a science, and I was going to create an online course to talk about this actually, because I've now created 6 online courses. I used.
By the way, I want to break that point down. Is that whenever you do one thing well, there's always, and this is an important lesson for everybody, no matter what side hustle you do. Whenever you do one thing well, you can start doing the meta well and make a living at it. So for instance, I was a day trader, and then I wrote books about day trading. And then I made a website about day trading, which became a business, which I sold. And then I started a hedge fund where I funded other day traders. So there's always, there's ways to scale horizontally. Like, let's say with day trading, I could have raised more money, or vertically, I just went meta and went into other aspects. I went further and further away from actually day trading, but then explaining the mechanics and the structure of it and so on.
Well, you call that
that's what you did with, where you're doing with courses.
Yeah, so you call that like the spoken wheel approach or something. And I
Yes.
think that makes a lot of sense, because what I decided to do was I created this online course for stand-up comedy, and it just hit really well. And for everybody listening, like I just want everybody to understand, like I created this stand-up comedy course in 2 days. I spent zero money creating it. I edited it on my phone, basically. I uploaded it to Udemy and to Skillshare and to TabletWise, so 3 different markets. And then
I never even heard of TabletWise.
It's a new one. So it's nothing but profit. I spent zero. You know what I mean? The ROI is infinity, because I spent zero money, zero capital to start it, and basically didn't do anything to market it. I just used the tools that Udemy already has, and there's a market insights tool that tells you what people are looking for and what they do not have very many course examples of, in order to see that stand-up comedy was it was an opportunity. Like, there were 2 courses. I looked at both of them. They weren't that good. They were done by 2 comics who maybe knew what they were talking about, but they just weren't that well produced, and they didn't talk about comedy the way that I knew I would talk about comedy. And so I literally...
So how did you know that there would be demand? Like, maybe they weren't doing well because there was no demand for them.
Well, the courses that were there actually were doing okay, because there was a lot of demand. So that's one of the cool things about Udemy's Markets Insights tool, is like, just like if you were going to create an e-commerce company, you would look up popular keywords and try to see what maybe pages come up, or what things on Amazon come up, or whatever, what things on YouTube come up. If you search those to see if if there was not very good examples of what you were looking for based on the keyword, that would show you that there's an opportunity to create something there. In the same way that you would do that, I used a tool that Udemy provides for free, which just says, here are the courses that people are searching for that don't have a lot of courses available for them. So a lot of people were looking...
I totally did not know that.
Yeah. So a lot of people were looking for stand-up comedy and didn't have there was no course available. And if it's true on Udemy, it's got to be true on these other platforms. So I just saw that these 2 courses they were actually, like, so far as I could tell, they were actually selling pretty well, but they just weren't that great in terms of their content. And so I just I'm just going to create a better course than these guys. Like, because you don't have to be the best course for X. You just have to be a good course for X and better than maybe some other examples that are in the area. But the best part about this is that doesn't even matter necessarily, because even if you shoot how to make a sandwich on your phone and it takes you, let's say you're all in investment, it takes you 30 minutes of shooting for some reason. It takes you 30 minutes of shooting. And then you edit for another 2 hours and upload the course. It's taken you 4 hours. Even if you make only $6, $7 on that course a month, which you would probably make more than that, it's like whatever. That's money you didn't have before, and it took you 4 hours of work. Across a long enough tail, that really starts adding up. So you decided stand-up comedy, which is something you love, and that's another thing to break out here is that you were able to... You love stand-up comedy. It's all consuming, even on top of your full-time job or part-time job or whatever. And you realized you could monetize this passion in a way different from just performing it, which I think is a key insight also, which there's a lot of people who don't realize all the things that they could monetize that they might be passionate about. You use the Udemy Market Insights free tool to figure out that there was demand for this. And, maybe if there was demand for something else, you would realize, oh, I also have passion for this. I'll do this. But what was the first steps in making the course? Like, how do you make the course? Yeah. So I'm going to break down. So everybody listening this is going to be basically the same content I'm going to put out in my how to create a course in 2 weeks course, which I'll pop out. So you're getting this, I guess, for free. But just because you love James Altucher. So I'd love to see Jerry Seinfeld attempt to make a course, because he's not going to hear this. Anyway, he I'm sure that's not one of his priorities, but
we're both willing to open up for him.
Yeah. yeah, please, Jerry. I'll give you my course for free, Jerry. Anyway,
you might need it.
The point is, so I would, this is how you design an online course very quickly and simply. Get one piece of paper and just write down what is the one thing this course is going to teach you. Just what did you not know at the beginning of this course that you're going to know at the end of this course, and make that specific. So I can't tell you that I'm going to teach you how to be a great stand-up comic, because that is, everybody's on their own journey. That is really difficult. I don't even know if I know how to be a great stand-up comic. That's the challenge. But what I can teach you is how to write 5 minutes worth of jokes and teach you how to get on stage in an open mic. Like, that's what I can teach you. So I limited my course scope to just one thing. Here's one thing that you couldn't do when you started this course that you can do at the end of this course, and I'm going to teach you all the skills.
And by the way, it's not like those two things are random things. Like, if you can do those two things well, and they're completely different skills, like A, writing 5 minutes of stand-up comedy, and B, learning how to scope out the environment and find the correct mics to perform at. If you could do those two things well and consistently, you're going to be amazingly successful. Like, there's a compound effect of learning something, which every time you go up and write a new 5 minutes, you're going to get better.
Well, so I mean, I just think about this. So if you were writing 5 minutes of material, writing and refining it and getting on stage, just do that 12 times and now you have a whole hour. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. I mean, obviously that by itself is quite complicated. And, people can spend a ton of time doing it, but it isn't more complicated than that. So I basically just then, after you've written this down on your piece of paper, you just need to write down what are the things that someone needs to know in order to learn to do the very specific thing that I've written down at the top of this piece of paper. And that might be, and I don't know how many bullet points that's going to be. It might be 4, it might be 5, it might be 10, it might be 12, whatever. And if you don't want to use a piece of paper for this, I really highly recommend mind mapping software. I use a MindNode, which is great for it. And
MindNode.
And it basically just allows me to very quickly map out what points someone's going to know. And for each one of those points that someone needs to know, then draw a dash to the right of it and write down, how am I going to teach that to somebody? And this is your course. Once you get this done, this is the outline of what you need to create for your online course.
So give me an example of using a mind map or MindNode. I've heard people talk about this, like a mutual friend of ours, another comedian, Brian Scott McFadden. He always says when he writes jokes, for instance, he'll have some concept like, coronavirus, and he'll start throwing out words and building this mind map. And he says there's software for it, but I don't really know what he means.
Yeah, so it's basically it's a visual map. It's a visual software to help you arrange your thoughts. So instead of just, even an outline is like too organized for some people. Like, my brain is very frenetic. Lots of thoughts will come out at different points. Like, I'll be thinking about, how do I deliver jokes? Like joke delivery. You know what I mean? That's one part of this course. So how do I deliver a joke? Well, in order to understand joke delivery, you actually have to understand inflection, and inflection actually has to do with the writing process. So I might write down during the time that I'm trying to outline how I'm going to teach you how to deliver a joke. I might go, oh shit, I got to go back to jokes and then write into the course over there inflection and like why that's important to consideration at that time. And what you're doing...
Inflection is so incredibly important, by the way.
Yeah.
People don't realize, people think stand-up comedy is about having a sense of humor, which it is. Like, you have to be funny, but that's like one skill of maybe 15 that you have to equally master.
Yeah.
So inflection and using your voice is incredibly important. And I look back at like old videos of myself and I can see the difference with now. And then I also look at videos of like, the top guys, and it's like all voice. It's so much is voice and inflection.
Yeah, but like, this is what you've just pointed out though, is like if you are trying to create a course on stand-up comedy, making sure that you refer back to the scope at the beginning, and really this is true for any course, is very important, because you want to think, what do I need how deeply into inflection do I need to go in order to teach someone who's never done it to get on stage and do it for 5 minutes and not totally bomb? What do I need to do to teach that person that? And it's not as much as like if you and I sat down, we could talk about inflection for a long time and have tons of examples of jokes in which like though inflection changes the meaning of the joke. And maybe that's an opportunity for another course, like just to build out in the future. Like we'll do a deep dive on delivery or something like that. And that course is, the beginner course is, $20. The deep dive is $50. And it's a 3-hour course just on that part. And somebody can go buy that later if that's a problem or they want to learn more or whatever. Like that.
Right. Well, and that's part of the spoken wheel approach too, which is you kind of establish demand for the core idea, and then you have higher end products that are a little more niche, which, do deep dives. You're going to sell less. You're going to sell less of them, but if you price them higher, you can make even more money on the kind of higher end upsells, and also gives you upsells in the marketing of the initial course.
Yeah. It basically like, so this is how one course can become like an entire, lucrative side hustle for you. Is that like there's a realm of possibilities that exist as you're just building out this one thing. I mean, think about just return to the sandwich course. Like there are people who don't know how to make sandwiches. A certain percentage of those people, if your course is good enough, are gonna go, well, shit, I want to know how to make Subway sandwiches now. I want to know how to make paninis now. I want to know how to make, and those are all things you can do. If you enjoy making sandwiches and you and your friends tell you that you make good ones, this is an entire potential business that you can develop just around that.
Right. And I want to bring up two more things, is that you can only get this information through an online course. And I'll explain what I mean. If you read a book about stand-up comedy, of which I'm sure, Brendon, you and I both have read many books on it, they really just talk about joke structure and writing a joke. They very rarely talk about anything else. They might talk a little, like have a side chapter about something else, but not. It's really about joke structure and lots of examples, and might even be a little old-fashioned. Who knows? Or if you watch a great stand-up special, you're only watching. Like if I watch a Chris Rock special, I'm watching the best comedian in the world, arguably, after a year of hundreds and hundreds of sets refining material. And so he's doing a set that's so far beyond being able to kind of back out what he's doing. Like it doesn't feel like he's doing material. He feels like he's talking to the audience.
It doesn't make sense to try to learn basketball by watching Michael Jordan. Like he's or LeBron James or whatever. It's like they're the level.
This is true for every industry.
Yeah, the level that they're playing at. You if you were a beginner, you don't have the eyes to see it. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't enjoy it or go watch it. Like Chris Rock's Bigger and Blacker is in a lot of ways like the perfect comedy special, and it's so tight from top to bottom. Like I recommend it in the course. Like go watch it, because you can, when you start learning the tools and you then go back and watch that course, you're like, oh, I see what he's doing here.
I'll give you an example straight from that one. Like, you know how Chris Rock, he just walks really fast back and forth on the stage. It's almost like he's like this predator lion walking back and forth on the stage while he's talking. Tony Rock, his brother, told me the reason he does that is so that you really can't afford to close your eyes while he's performing, because then you won't know where he is when you open your eyes. Like, it forces people to keep attention. So it's really like even
super engaging.
Like that,
it's super engaging.
Yeah, but you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, what do I do with this information? You wouldn't necessarily think that was a planned thing that he was doing. And then once you know it's a planned thing, what do you do with that information? You can't do the same thing he does. So, you need a course to kind of guide you through this type of thinking. So
this is exactly the kind of stuff that, like, when you're planning out your course, like, you can toss this in there where you're like, here's these bits that I know, and here's what I know about this. And here's what somebody who doesn't understand this, like, if you're ever hanging out with your friend and then you turn to them and like you're watching something on TV or you're around them in some situation and something happens and you turn to them and go, oh, you know what? I bet you don't know. Actually, this is cool because, and then you explain something. That's exactly the kind of stuff that I'm talking about that makes it into these courses. Because part of the reason people watch them is they're entertaining, and like, be an interesting person who's delivering this information. It's deepening people's appreciation of the world. Like, Skillshare just put out a whole bunch of, market information around the fact that, like, people are now watching Skillshare as entertainment. Like, they're not even necessarily interested in, like, learning the things that people have to talk about. But if you like, I mean, the sandwich stuff is a great example because how many cooking shows exist of people talking about sandwiches? That's it. That's what you're making. You're making entertainment for people in this space, and they're learning something while they're doing it. And if you want to, like, part of the reason I started doing it also is I wanted to build an audience. And I have a ton of people who have messaged me now after taking my stand-up course who then go watch my comedy special I put on YouTube, and they're like, dude, this is so great. Like, when are you going to come to, Duluth, Minnesota or whatever, because I would love to see you do stand-up. And I had no idea that was even going to happen, but it's basically happened because people are learning me, who I am through this thing. So just to move on to talk about, like, once you have that outlined and all the things that you want to, like, how to do it, you need to go do one of, like, two things. You either need to write a script for each one of these bits, or you just need to make some bullet points if you know that you can explain this effectively to somebody. Like, one of the mistakes I made in the early part of me creating the stand-up course was I actually scripted out exactly what I was going to say. And then I realized actually that was way less interesting and way less engaging than if I just knew the points and was talking to the camera like I would be talking to a friend, explaining, what I was going to be doing. And so each one of these points, this is a lesson. This is just a lesson in the course. So you're not going to film one long thing doing this whole thing. You're going to take each one of these little points that you brought out in terms of what someone has to learn, and that's now the lesson. That's you with your phone on a phone stand, recording yourself talking into a microphone that you bought on Amazon for $5. And that's it. You don't need better stuff than that. You know what I mean? There's free courses out there that teach you how to, do lighting and things like this just to help. Udemy and Skillshare have interest in people making high quality courses. So there's free information on how to do that stuff. You now have an outline. Just go shoot it on your phone, edit it on iMovie, edit it on whatever the video editing software that you have on your phone to draw out those courses into lessons. And that's about it. Honestly, that's
And let me ask you, so, like, let's say on your outline, one of the top level things to learn is, voice inflection. Is that a separate video? Is it just part of one big video? Like, what does a course look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you want to keep each one of these lessons to about between 2 to 8 minutes. Just in the way that, if you can't get this out in 2 to 8 minutes, it maybe needs to be two different lessons. So inflection is a good point because inflection goes along with delivery, and being on stage. That's an entire unit in my stand-up comedy course. It's like 5 lessons. Each of them are between 2 and 8 minutes of what do you need to be to feel comfortable? What do you need to know to feel comfortable being on stage in front of an audience? You need to know about inflection, gesture, movement, all of these things I cover. And I've shot myself with, like, a wide angle lens in my own living room with a microphone and a mic stand that I own just to deliver that.
What's the wide angle lens? What camera?
Well, I have a Canon 80D that I bought years ago for filming, like, sketches and me doing stand-up comedy. So the wide angle lens that I use there is a 10 millimeter to 25 millimeter zoom. But you can go buy a wide angle lens for your smartphone on Amazon for like $10. I mean, they're so cheap. I had one that I used for a long time that was just exactly that. And a directional mic that I bought for, I think, $30 that I used to film stand-up comedy on. So, I mean, you don't have to have, like, a really good equipment in order to do this. You literally, like, some of the best courses are just people shooting on their phones.
So unpacking so far, you used Udemy's Market Insights free tool to figure out what subjects are in demand. So happened that there was a subject that fit very closely with your interests. And then just to bring in Skillshare to this, Skillshare had some evidence that people not only want to learn, but they also buy courses because it's entertainment. So that's, a double reason to do a course. Now, then you roughly outline or at least sketch out all the things you want to talk about, which let's say there's 10 things. Let's say you take any topic and there's 10 main umbrella topics, and then each one of those might have 1 to 5 topics underneath them. And now you have, and then maybe you write down some bullet points about each of those topics. And now you have material to make 2 to 8 minute videos about each of those subtopics that fit under the 10 umbrella topics. And then you shoot it just with good lighting. You're sitting down. Is there anything special? Do you want to move around? Like, how do you keep people engaged? Do you want to move around during the lesson? Do you want to write stuff on a whiteboard? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can write stuff on a whiteboard. I created PowerPoint PowerPoint, Google Slides presentations that then I used QuickTime to record on my own computer to draw out some lessons here. When I was talking about joke writing, we can get into joke structure that way. But the same.
And then just to understand, so yeah, when you have a PowerPoint, I'm just like, for people completely technically naive, which by the way, I am, despite having majored in computer science and gone to graduate school for computer science, you can then take what you're filming on the camera and the QuickTime of the PowerPoints and edit them together in something like GarageBand, which is fairly easy, or on your phone, or no, iMovie you mentioned.
Yeah, iMovie. I mean, I'm sure Windows has a analogous software that is available out of the box. But even then, I mean, like, you don't have to put those things together into those can be separate lessons. Like it can be so easy just to kind of to pop this together. But gesture is a good one. If your question was, what are you doing to keep people entertained? Gesture, you know what I mean? It's the same thing as, for me, it was easy because I have an improv and stand-up background. I know how to behave toward a camera so that I look interesting. Maybe this is a challenge, and there's a learning curve, Maybe if you're the sandwich dude who's making the sandwich course, your first episode isn't that good. Your first course isn't that great. Maybe you make a handful of dollars on it or whatever, but maybe you realize, you know what, actually really I like this. I'm going to go create a handful more courses. Maybe you go back and make a second version that's even better. Like, my philosophy, like the stand-up comedy course, James, was my third course that I made. I made 2 other courses that were about sales before I made that course. And those 2 courses were awful. I mean, like, they were poorly produced. I looked ridiculous. I looked stilted. They were not well produced. And I actually even paid people to help me produce those courses, and they weren't even that good. It was the third course that I made on stand-up comedy that I did 100% by myself, recorded everything, edited everything, and then popped it out on those platforms. That's the one that really took off. And then since then, I've made a handful of more courses that have done well.
How many videos altogether were in the stand-up comedy course?
Oh man, that's a good question. Probably 50, probably 55 videos,
Wow.
somewhere in there.
So, but you were able to do it in how long did it take you?
It took me 2 days to shoot and edit.
And then you uploaded them. So I guess you go to Udemy, you fill out some form. This is what the course is about. This is the description. This is what you're going to learn. Here's the outline, and then you just upload lesson 1, lesson 2. Do you have homework or anything?
Yeah, I mean, like, I put assignments in there. So one of them is they had to go watch, Jerry Seinfeld's Tight 5 actually on I know he keeps coming up, dude. He just keeps coming up.
I'd recommend watching his documentary Comedian from like 2002.
It's absolutely great documentary. But his Tight 5 on the Late Show from years ago is just a good example of like a bunch of different punchlines and callbacks, and you can see the setups, and so when you're learning that stuff, it's just a good example to do that. So I gave that homework and then asked a series of questions. But this goes into another good part about the course, which is if you have people who watch it and they're really interested in learning it, and they're gonna put questions in, if you engage them back, it becomes more interesting for them. They're talking to, that's the difference between a course and that you're taking and a YouTube video or a book or whatever, is that you actually are talking to an instructor.
Is there a community on like, is there like a Q&A area where you have to participate, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I ask questions to the students in the course, and they can answer them or not, basically, and the answers come to me, and I can write responses, and I'm always available for someone to email. Like, I receive email from people in the course. Sometimes I'll, shoot a quick like audio file back to them explaining something. I mean, that's good feedback for what the course needs to be, or if there's an opportunity to do a deeper dive into something. Like, you're letting your audience kind of drive your product development in this regard, and it's actually a good way to do it. This is different fundamentally than somebody doing like a YouTube or a book or something like that, is that there's a lot of kind of real-time engagement with people who are taking your course.
Well, where's the community? Is it on Udemy? Like, is there an area where they can log in and like in this ongoing chat?
Well, so there isn't one on Udemy and there isn't one on Skillshare, although people can make comments. So there is like kind of a general community, but specifically for my course, like, or specifically for anybody who's launching a course, if you go to Thinkific and create a course in Thinkific, you can create a community for people to engage on that platform. And that's a platform made specifically for people to develop online courses that they can charge for and create communities around. So that's the next step. So you were saying you have maybe a 4 compound 5 figure business that's going to transition to a 6-figure business. How do you that's the transition. That's the next level for me, is moving these courses onto Thinkific where people are buying them directly from me and not on a platform like Udemy or Skillshare.
Yeah, and the other thing is you could just, given that you uploaded to multiple platforms, you could also specify, hey, this Facebook community, you could set up a for-pay Facebook community. If you want to join the community where I have office hours, 2 times a week, it's an extra $10 a month. This is part of the spoken wheel aspect.
Exactly. Like that's one of the things that's cool about this is you can get people to join your mailing list. You can get people to join your Facebook community. You can get people to, you have access to message people who have taken your course. I have thousands of people who have taken my course, and I could go message all of them if I have a new course coming out, or if I came out with a new product that I want them to take a look at. All of that stuff is available, to you when you develop this.
Right. And they're it's not like they're a random audience that you've paid for. Like, this is a loyal audience who's already paid you money, so they know that you're the type of person. There's a cognitive bias. They know that you're the type of the person they're willing to trust and give money to, and they'll listen to what you say. There's probably a higher conversion rate than random advertising.
Well, they've already spent. Implicitly, you're worth their time. Like, they've already. What is Cialdini would call that the commitment and consistency principle, where they've already spent money, so they are invested in you now at this point and in what you have to deliver.
And so, have you done courses since the stand-up comedy course?
Yeah, I've done a bunch more, and I've got 2 more that I'm developing right now. The one I did afterwards was how to cold email, the complete guide, because I just was doing all this cold emailing, 1 for sales and 2 for booking my podcast, and I thought this is people.
That's a great course to do. That people always. You should almost look at like my Q&As, basically. Like, I get that question a lot. Like, I should look at my Q&As to figure out what courses to do. Like, that is something people really need to do, because we're all now sitting in our homes cold emailing each other.
I've gotten some amazing guests on my podcast, and it's just from cold emailing. Like, I've interviewed James, the upcoming interview with James Carson, the author of Finite and Infinite Games. It's
that's a great
classic book. I think Douglas Rushkoff. He's he's agreed.
I've been texting with Doug. He probably wouldn't know who I am, but I remember back in 1992, we were both on this pre-web thing called The Well, which was like a massive chat room for just people who were interested in the internet.
Yeah,
and he was on there. I was on there. Kevin. Kelly was on there, and a bunch of other people.
Oh yeah, all the guys who have now gone on to massive new media fame.
Yeah, them more than me.
Yeah, but I've had interviews with amazing people, like a famous international male porn star, Rocco Siffredi, did the podcast. And it's all
after you guys were fooling around a little.
Yeah, because we were messing around. You know what? It's interesting because he was the subject of a Netflix documentary about him and his life. Because, but for the fact that he is a porn star, he is almost exactly like almost every other sort of normal person, except that he's like a celebrity. And it's strange. Like, his whole family knows this. It's not a secret. And it's just, I was like, dude, this is so fascinating. Like, how do you live this life, but have, 2 kids? He's sustained a marriage for 25 years. Like, what's that like? And I just cold emailed him.
How does she not get jealous?
Well, I think she used to be a porn star also. So I feel like she kind of gets it. But
okay,
it's fascinating to me but that's why I wanted to talk to him. It's because I just cold emailed him. It's a great skill to have. And that's why I thought, you know what, I should just go ahead and document this, because this is just such an important part. If you're somebody who's, this is another big thing. It's like, I do sales. I've had a career in sales for 10 years. Like I said earlier, I'd like to move off of doing it and into stand-up comedy full time. And, and I've made a lot of strides in attempting to do that. But, if you're somebody who has a career doing whatever you're doing, like programming, developing, maybe you're an entrepreneur, maybe you are a salesperson yourself listening to this, you can create a course around this stuff. It's great brand marketing for you as a career, for your career. Like, so I have, this book, Cold Call Like a Comedian. That was basically, it's the first book I created. It was a transcript from the course I made of the same name. And
spoken wheel approach.
Yeah. Whenever anybody I was interviewing for jobs was like, what have you done? What are you about, et cetera. I would just send them a copy of that book. And I'm like, here's a book I wrote that gives you a sense for my entire approach to this. Like, how many other people interviewing have a book,
Right. Like, I always tell people, like, if you're being interviewed for something, like either a job or a TEDx talk or a consulting gig or whatever, if everything else being equal, if one person has a book and the other doesn't, they choose the person with the book, period.
Well, the same thing is true with the online course. So, like, I have, I'm consulting at this company. I've got a team of guys that I just hired. They're, young guys. They're salespeople. They're hungry. I can send them all of my training materials about cold emailing and cold calling right off the bat. Just like, here you go. Here's stuff that you're going to need to know. This is my approach. And if you have any questions, like, go take these courses and we can talk about it. I'm your coach and available for you here as well. But this is basically the way that I do this. So, I mean, there's just a lot of reasons to create a course like this.
So let's go back to the stand-up comedy one. So you made the 50 videos, you made, assignments and some Q&A opportunities. You uploaded to, you said Udemy, Tablet, what was it? TabletWise and Skillshare?
Yep.
Did you think about other places like Teachable or Coursera?
No, I probably should go do that, actually.
Or LinkedIn Learning or something like that?
Yeah, I should probably go do it to all of those.
And then we discussed the possibility, like, you could have done a for-pay Facebook community or even just a free Facebook community as just like an added resource for the course, more reasons for people to buy your course. You could potentially in the future have upsells from the comedy course, like, hey, you were an all-star at the comedy course. Now I'm doing one it's 40 videos just on inflection. This makes the difference between, Dave Chappelle and an amateur or whatever. And so you could have a higher end, very specific course. Or you can go meta where you could do the course on courses. So, the course on making an online course. And so you've done a bunch of these courses. And the good thing is they're streams for life. Like, you never know when we're in an environment like, let's say a pandemic and an economic lockdown, where suddenly salespeople have to do cold emails and your course sales spike because we're in a lockdown. I don't know if they did spike, but my guess is they probably did okay.
They did great
during this time.
At the beginning of it. I mean, the stand-up comedy course, people can't go out and do open mics really, so that's kind of a challenge. But yeah, a lot of them, they did quite well right at the beginning of this, especially.
And so even if no one course makes, and this is what I also think about book writing, but online courses sound like even an easier way to do this. Like, if you have, let's say, after 2 or 3 years, let's say hypothetically, I'm just gonna make it up, you have 100 courses that you've made, like every weekend, every other weekend, maybe every 2 weeks, you make another online course. So you have 50 courses after 2 years. And if each one makes $200 a month, you're making $10,000 a month. That's a stream of income. You could live anywhere in the world on that.
Yeah, it's a geometry problem at some point. And you're not just making it, like you just said, like, there's all these, platforms that I should have it on Coursera. I should have it on LinkedIn Learning. Like, I should have them on all of these other locations. Like, it just becomes, if your course sells once a day or twice, from any of these platforms, you're already making, X amount of money additionally a day, additionally a week, additionally a year. And here's the thing, James, I've done zero to market these courses on any of these platforms, like nothing.
Yeah, I didn't even know until yesterday. I didn't even know you did online courses. I've known you for years. So
yeah, I didn't. I've done
you
zero.
You haven't even told people you know.
I don't like talk about it because it's not a big part of. I don't think about it that much. Like, I spend maybe 20 minutes a week answering questions or emailing people back on the platform. And otherwise, it just adds money to my bottom line. I don't do hardly anything. I mean, think about it like this. I easily make $500 a month on that stand-up comedy course, if you wanted to buy an online business that made $500 a month, it would cost you 15 grand. Like I just did that that's 2 hours, 1 day, a year and some change ago, and have sat on it sort of ever since. So
by the way,
please don't go create a course and unseat me.
But that's very that let's just go through the math on that. So $500 a month is $6,000 in just free money a year, and typically a small cash flow creating business that requires no additional work will go for between 2 and 3 times earnings. So 2.5 times 6,000 is $15,000. That's why you could sell that course today to somebody for $15,000, because it's just, as opposed, someone could put $15,000 in that and make whatever that is, 40% per year, or they could put that $15,000 in a savings account and make 0.1% a year. So that's why those are, particularly the less work that's involved in maintaining it, it's more like a savings account.
There you go.
So, and why don't you market it? Like, what would you do if you were going to market it?
Well, that's what I'm going to be doing for my own, for when I move it onto Thinkific and start marketing it. I mean, I want to start marketing it on Facebook and on different platforms that I know I can do ads on. But, it's just like, I wanted a business that I didn't have to think about or continue to try to put money into, or
I'm going to look at Thinkific. I don't know Thinkific.
Yeah, or continue to push.
And that's trusted course platform.
There you go. It's just a course platform. So I just would encourage anybody to go think about how to do this, because it's a really simple business to get into, and it can add to cash flow for you pretty quickly and easily, especially if you do it on these platforms like Udemy or Skillshare to start.
But by the way, what you opened my mind up to right now was you could get pretty niche or pretty narrow and call it an online course. Like, I always think an online course has to be huge, and then it feels overwhelming to me. Like, here's my online course on investing. Here's my online course on self-publishing. But, you could take some narrow area like cold emailing, or you could imagine an online course on, I think of, like, let's say podcasting. There, you can make obviously an online course on podcasting, but you can also do an online course on how to prepare
for an interview,
a podcast guest.
Yeah.
Like that, it's by itself could be an online course.
When you so I have this intro to stand-up course, and then I have another one, which is how to start how to start your own stand-up comedy show. And what I want to do is, if I can find 2 or 3 other things to build that out about and there's interest, I'll put those together and then finally wrap that all together into the complete how to do stand-up comedy package. And then that goes on Thinkific, and I sell that for, instead of going and buying all of those courses each for $20, you can get the whole thing for $50. And now,
well, how do you price? How do you price things?
I mean, Udemy has some tools around this. Skillshare is priced on royalty, so you pay, as a Skillshare member, you pay a monthly fee and then get to watch kind of whatever you want, I guess. And then Skillshare pays you out based on minutes watched of your course. So it's a little bit like Kindle Unlimited in that regard. Like, there's a pool of money that gets distributed to everybody. So each platform is kind of on its own, a different sort of way. But I mean, you can build these things together, like they can build up. I'm already planning on taking all of my sales courses and bundling them together into a course to market to entrepreneurs, and here's how you build a sales development function in your company. Because a lot of consulting that I've done has been for entrepreneurs who start a business but are technicians and not salespeople. They don't really understand sales. So these are all the basics you need to understand of how to put a sales department into your new company and things that you should think about. Well, and that's just going to be other courses I've created and then finally bundled together into a full thing.
And by the way, that could be again, spoken wheel, like always to figure out what are the other opportunities. That could be a whole different type of pricing, like how to create a instantly profitable sales department, and here's the full package, and maybe you add some CRM type software to it, maybe even pre-built software that you get affiliate fees on. And it's basically sales department in a box, and you could charge $10,000 for that to, companies that are just setting up their sales department.
Oh, easily.
Like, it doesn't have to be just, yeah. So there's lots of ways to kind of, once you start doing this and getting the habit of making these courses, it seems like there's lots of ways to go. And the main things I've learned is that it's pretty easy to make one and upload it and start monetizing it. And you can go as niche as you want. And if it doesn't work, you could just, replace it with a newer course that's a little broader. You don't have to do a course on how to write a novel. You could do one how to write a science fiction romance novella or whatever, and publish it on Amazon. Whatever, your courses could be as niche as you want. I'm just even trying to think, like, what courses could I do that are super niche? Well, definitely, like, every aspect of podcasting is like.
You could also
course.
do how to start a national conversation.
Yeah, how to go viral and get at least 1 million people to hate. How to get 1 million people to hate you in 50 video lessons, and what other stuff? I've done so many different things I could talk about. So the thing is, like, instead of doing, for instance, a course on day trading, I can do a course on very niche, like, value day trading or counter trend day, something very specific, or
and I'm guarantee you there's an audience for it. Like, no matter what there is, there's going to be somebody there for it. I hate to do this, James, but I actually got to wrap up, unfortunately.
All right, no problem. Thank you for your time. I know I was late and you gave me great advice earlier. What's one tip for gestures when I'm on stage? I'm going, this is airing Friday. On Saturday, I'm at the Birchmere Comedy Club in Alexandria, Virginia. I haven't done comedy in months. What's a good gesture I should do?
What you need to do is wave your hand. You look like a wizard, so this is like you waving your hand like you're casting a spell on the audience. That's the gesture I think is the funniest to watch you do, to be honest.
To watch me specifically?
Yeah.
When do I do it? Do I do it in the beginning or do it in the end? I don't even know.
Sometimes you do it in the beginning when you're explaining something, and it's so funny, man.
All right, good. I'm going to remember that. And then one more. Okay, I'm using, I'm obviously trying to use the Seinfeld material. I think that's a good idea or not, because it's in Virginia. They might not even know.
I think you need to mention it at least, but you need to test the waters for sure. And,
all right.
And it's so real to you that you are they're going to connect with your feelings because your feelings are so real and raw about it.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, Brendon Lemon, and keep in touch on this.
Thanks so much again, guys.